Hello, stranger. It's me, Madame Strangeways, back with 2 new true strange stories for you. First, a monthly case of sleep paralysis. Or is it? And also, a haunted hotel in historic Chicago. And, as always, solicited or not, usually not, I share my insights and observations after each spooky tale. Now, it's time to dim the lights and get cozy while I read you these true strange stories here on Madame Strangeways. Paranormal Story from My Childhood by Eden. First, a little bit of background info to bring the story along. I am an 18-year-old girl, and until I was 11 years old, I lived in a very old family home. I always knew my childhood home to be built back in the 1930s or around that time period, and being lived in by generations. This home was peaceful, and we never felt threatened once. But there is absolutely no denying that there was something or things within its energy. I have 2 younger siblings and have lived with both of my parents my entire life. We all can remember the footsteps of heavy boots in the hallways at night, the pull-down ladder to the attic flinging down at random, and the shadows flashing around the corners and through doorways. My story starts when I was about 7 or 8 and would repeat about once every month or 2. I would be dead asleep in my childhood bedroom with my door closed, always for me, and randomly would gasp awake. Almost involuntarily, I would shift my sight towards the doorway, and my door would just crack open a little itty bit. A small girl would slowly peep in with her blonde hair and little white dress, making her way for what feels like an eternity to the bottom side of my bed. She would sit down, very polite, and stare into my soul. Every single time, it was the exact same. She would whisper words to me that I have never been able to recall, but I sit there and it's almost like a telepathic communication or understanding of her. It lasts for what feels like forever. Then, once she's spilled all her words, she holds her dress down to her knees and hops back off the side of my bed towards the door. She leaves, and my door clicks shut. Immediately, I shake out of my paralysis. I know that sounds like the climax of the story, but just please keep reading. So after a few years of this girl occasionally popping in and out like she does, I finally decide to tell my mom about these weird dreams. I think I never really thought to tell her because I was never scared of the young girl. She was always calm and polite, like I mentioned. So as I'm explaining to my mom the details of my dream, she stops me after saying, "young girl." My mom looks at me with the weirdest expression and asks, "Is this little girl blonde, or does she wear a white dress?" I shook my head, saying yes, quickly, in disbelief. And then she thinned out her lips, saying, "I saw her looking around my doorway one morning." I don't remember much of what happened after that conversation me and my mom had, but I continued to have the same dream on and off until we moved. We own the land we live on and tore the old home down and had a new house built in the same place. I was 11 years old when we moved into the new house, and I remember a few months after moving in, the same girl. She came to see me one last time, and I haven't seen her since that night. It's been over 7 years, and still no girl. I've had so many other freaky things occur already so far, and truly believe that the energy sticks around. If you've made it this far, thank you. And let me know if there could be any logical explanations. Eden, thank you so much for that nightmare fodder. You know, typically when we hear about sleep paralysis, and when I talk about it on the show, typically sleep paralysis is involving scary shadow creatures, monsters, just an ominous, dangerous feeling. The stereotypical old hag, which is just some sort of evil crone looking woman. An imp or a demon sitting on your chest, or the old woman on your chest, or the tall hat man. Everyone's favorite, the tall hat man with his tall hat creeping on you, staring at you as you sleep. Not ideal in any of those circumstances, but you know what I had never heard of is a little girl with like pigtails and a little white dress, just hanging out like like you're at a sleepover and just kind of yapping. I have not heard of that. And you know what? I did some research, because of course I did. And the amount of stories I have found online of people talking about seeing a little girl during sleep paralysis is way more than one. It was way more than just your story. There's stories on Reddit, there's stories on forums, there's stories, well, there's questions on Quora. Like, I see a little girl while I sleep. Wow. I had no idea that was something that people typically see, but apparently it is. Now, it's not always this blonde little girl with pigtails and a cute little white dress that y'all saw, that you saw and your mom saw. I've read that, they have long dark hair, they're wearing black, or they have totally black eyes. It's a gamut. So this goes back to what I was talking about in the last episode. Kids are scary. Kids are freaky. Children are just creepy. So that must be why it's in everybody's subconscious that this is what comes out during sleep paralysis. Or, since your mom saw this little girl with her little pigtails, I think they were pigtails. I'm picturing pigtails. It might have been a ponytail. I'm going to go with pigtails because it sounds cuter. And more innocent, which is scarier. So this little girl, her little pigtails, her little white dress, she's just coming and hanging out while you're paralyzed and telling you little secrets. Scary. So your mom also saw her while she was not sleeping, while she was awake. Wow. That's ugh. And as always, with these stories, I love it when someone that has experienced something doesn't come out and give all of the details. Like, oh, I had a dream, and there was this girl, and she was white dressed, and no, you just mentioned a little girl. And then your mom provided those extra details that you already were very familiar with because of all of the scary paralysis visits. So rather than you saying, I see this little girl, she has a white dress, she has blonde hair, your mom provided those details, which I always love when that happens in these dreams. So for anybody that experiences anything paranormal and they share a house with someone, I really recommend going about it in that way if you're going to discuss it with them, which you should. Like, are you experiencing this thing too? But don't give them too many details because you don't want to lead the witness, right? And you want to make sure y'all are both seeing the same thing, because from that point, then you can start working on troubleshooting. Like, what unexplained phenomena are we experiencing? Everyone's favorite game in the home in which they live. I'm almost a little bit sad that she stopped visiting you when you moved, but I'm sure that you were probably not that sad. Because I'm sure that was exhausting. And even if she didn't make you feel scared, it's just inconvenient. So we're working with what sounds like, three different ideas, but you don't know. Yeah, I'm going to tell you. Number one, sleep paralysis. Classic. We know it. We love it. It easily explained, except then how do you explain that your mom was also seeing the same little girl? Ooh, and then there's the sounds that are coming from the house and the shadow figures that y'all are seeing, peeking around corners. So okay, all right, we're just gonna leave that there. Put a pin in that. Sleep paralysis question mark. Then number two, the fae, like fairies, but like, you know, not Disney fairies, like scary stealing children and whisking you away to the fairyland, which is also sort of synonymous with death. But those kinds of fairies. The fae apparently communicate with children more often than adults. And then also, they prefer to communicate with humans during dreams, is the fae lore, because we're more open to the concept of talking to fairies. So, maybe it was some sort of fae. I'm not a fae expert, but I do know that the fae folk are mischievous and cheeky. And if any of them are listening to me right now, they're also amazing and I love them and they're so cool and great. And I would never, ever suggest otherwise. So there's that. There's that option. Is it a fae? It's not a brownie, which is a type of fae, a delicious sounding type of fae. It's not a brownie. It's not a brooding, dark haired anti hero main male character in a romantasy novel. We know that. We definitely know that. Otherwise, I don't know. So number two, possibly fae. Number three, the specter of a child who used to live in the home but has been trapped there in the house and now is destined to wander the halls and have sleepovers with little girls who live there that have not necessarily given their consent to having sleep paralysis sleepovers. Oh, there's something there. Sleep paralysis, sleep over paralysis. I don't know. We got to workshop that and we'll come back to it. So maybe she used to live in the house. I know y'all own the land, but maybe at one point she did live in the house and she had some sort of tragic death and she's really just looking for friends. So, of course, a little girl that's there, I mean, she's lonely, so she wants to just hang out and tell you ghostly secrets that you don't remember in the morning because they're ghost secrets and you're not supposed to have them. And she used the last of her ghostly battery energy reserves to go visit you one last time in your new house as a sort of farewell. And that's why you haven't seen her since. It takes too much ghost juice. But as always, I really hope that it was just sleep paralysis and it never happens again. Vacation to Chicago by Ted. I visited Chicago recently in 2022 to attend graduation for my master's degree that I completed remotely. I stayed at a hotel near the university. When I pulled up in the Uber, the hotel did not look like what I expected. It was a thin and long building with a historical-looking outer appearance. I figured it's in historic Chicago and probably an older hotel. I was pretty tired from the flight, so I was eager to just go up to my room and crash. My wife came along with me for a mini vacation as well, so she could attest to it. Although it looked narrow from the outside, the lobby was surprisingly wide and spacious. I took the elevator to my floor, and I was talking to my wife about the plan for tomorrow's activities. I didn't really pay attention to the interiors of the elevator. We'll revisit this detail later in the story. I got off the elevator and looked for the signage to our room. The first thing I noticed was how wide the hallway was. Usually the hotel hallway is barely wide enough to fit two people walking side by side. This hallway was a good 8 foot in distance, and it reminded me of one location I encounter daily: my job. I'm a laboratory scientist working in a hospital, and the hallway width was about the same as that of a hospital's. I remarked this to my wife, who was in the same profession, and she concurred. We passed a door frame on the way to our room, and it also reminded me of the large safety double doors that the hospitals would have. We finally made it to our room and went to sleep soon because it was a late night. I was fast asleep and heard the ba-ba beep alarms, and I recognized the heart monitor and EKG alarms that I would hear from medical dramas and in patients' rooms when I would pass by at work. In the background, I heard people talking and yelling. I woke up to this noise, opened my eyes, and the monitor alarms were gone, but the background talking noise echoed for a second before it too disappeared. I went back to sleep because the room was still dark and quiet. In the morning, I told my wife the air vent must have carried the voices of people in other adjoining rooms, and I got woken up by them. We got ready to go to breakfast and went down to the lobby. I once again remarked how wide the hallway was and joked that they should make this the standard width so people wouldn't feel so claustrophobic in hotels. We got in the elevator and went down. This time, I felt fresh and awake, so I was able to read the poster on the elevator. My jaw dropped to the floor. This hotel used to be the infamous Cook County Hospital, one of the first hospitals established in Chicago, with claims to fame such as being opened early in 1832, serving as an army hospital in the Civil War, and establishing the first medical internship in 1866. I'm a blood bank and transfusion specialist and knew Cook County's reputation as the first institutional blood bank in the world. The wide hallway, the phantom monitor alarms, the speaking voices, they all made sense now. I felt moved and emotional to be staying at such a historic location. No other paranormal events happened for the rest of our stay, and we thoroughly enjoyed historic Chicago. One last thing is that we mentioned the experience to one of our Uber drivers, and she confirmed that her other guests have told her they encountered similarly creepy stories at this hotel. Ted, thank you so much for another one of your stories. This one is Traveling the United States edition. Jazz Hands, Chicago. So Cook County Hospital that then became your hotel, I just learned, apparently has 2 hotels. The whole hospital got turned into 2 hotels, a museum, and a food hall, which is crazy. I mean, I guess that's how big the hospital was, but wow, 2 hotels. So you stayed in one of the 2 hotels. And I found several stories from people saying that they had stayed there and they had scary stories to share. One of them kind of reminded me of what you were talking about, where you were hearing voices and you thought, oh, it just must be the neighbors, like adjoining rooms coming through the vent or somehow moving through the vent. Sort of like that, where they were hearing voices, like disembodied voices that did not seem befitting of a hotel. What's absolutely wild, is that you were saying you weren't even paying attention. Like you were tired. You weren't really looking around. You were just like, wow, these are really wide halls. And okay, so that's weird. And then only the next day after hearing the beeping, like from, I was going to say like ER, but that's from the 90s. So probably Grey's Anatomy. Like you're hearing Grey's Anatomy sound effects as you're sleeping. And then you wake up the next morning and you go in the elevator and, oh, hey, it used to be a hospital. Now, one could argue that even though you were tired and you weren't paying attention, that maybe you did see the poster and you just didn't, put two and two together. Also, just the fact that, yeah, you're so familiar with hospitals that width and seeing the doorways, like, your brain just kind of put two and two together. Like, did this used to be a hospital? But you just hadn't really consciously thought about it. But in the back of your mind, your subconscious, your unconscious brain, however you want to look at it, maybe it put two and two together and it said, two plus two in this instance means hospital. Maybe you were working under that assumption when you went to sleep, and then you did have hospital dreams. That's one explanation. Another explanation is that hospitals are hotbeds of paranormal activity because of all of the suffering, all of the intense emotions, the pain, of course, the dying, sure. But, to me, the thing about energy that you feel at hospitals, and if you've ever read stories of nurses or doctors or anybody that spends a lot of time at a hospital, if you have ever read any of their ghost stories and encounters, they are horrifying, and there's so many of them. There are so many stories, and you just don't hear the same amount of stories from people that work in retail. Well, in retail, you're getting different kind of nightmare stories, whereas in a hotel, nope, in a hospital, in a hotel turned hospital turned hotel, I got there. In a hospital turned hotel, you do have ghost stories. You have a lot of ghost stories in hospitals. So I think that it stands to reason that in these hospitals turned hotels, that, yeah, you're going to be seeing some of that activity that people that work in hospitals also experience. I mean, that just makes sense. Just because you break it up into a bunch of little rooms, I guess a hospital already has rooms. All right, just because you reno the place and you slap a nice carpet on the floor and you put some cookie cutter drapes that don't fully close on the windows, and like you have to go and hope that the hangers in the closet can be removed from the rod so that you can take one of them off and hope that it's a pants hanger, right, with the clips. Then you have to go take that hanger with the clips. If you can get it off the rod, you have to take that over to the curtains, and then you have to clamp the curtains shut, which is insane. You are paying to sleep. You are paying to sleep there, and you are having to MacGyver the curtains closed. It's bonkers. Anyway, the point is they put those awful curtains up. They give you a little work desk with a little lamp that has a little USB charger plug on there. They do all that. It doesn't get rid of the ghosts, unfortunately. None of that gets rid of ghosts. I mean, maybe. I guess it's possible that there is a construction company that does specialize in ghost removal and construction, renovation. If that's not a thing, first of all, I call dibs. Second of all, if it is a thing, I want to hear about it. Somebody tell me. So hopefully, one of the ghosts at this hospital turned hotel, Cook County Hospital, hopefully one of the ghosts that was there is not the ghost of serial killer, mass murderer, Richard Speck. So if you haven't heard of Richard Speck, he was active in the mid-60s. He murdered 8 nurses who were all living in a shared home. So there's this big manhunt for him. Obviously, someone that was staying at the same hotel as him, different hotel. Remember, this was a hospital back then. Someone who was staying at the same place as him recognized him. And Richard Speck, thinking, oh, the jig is up. He's going to tell the police and the police are going to catch me. He attempts suicide. Then the cops actually don't do anything. Why is that so common in these older true crime stories? Why is that so common? The police do nothing. But because of his attempted suicide, he's taken to the Cook County Hospital on July 17th, 1966. Then one of the doctors, I think he was actually a surgical resident physician, specifically Dr. Leroy Smith, 25 years old, hero. He noticed that he had that Richard, who was brought in, Richard Speck, let's not call him Richard, Dick has a born to raise hell tattoo, which was all over the newspaper stories during the manhunt. So this doctor, Dr. Smith, recognizes it. The police are finally called and they actually respond. And then Richard Speck, the mass murderer, Chicago's first mass murderer, I think is what he's touted as, was finally arrested because he was taken to the Cook County Hospital. One can assume that his ghost is probably not there because that's not where he died. He died later in prison, although his sentence, rightfully so, he was convicted of all 8 murders, and his sentence was 400 to 1,200 years. Not long enough. Probably not long enough. So for anyone listening, if you take a trip to Chicago, you know where you need to stay. And if anything happens to you, if you stay in either of the 2 hotels that are now in Cook County Hospital, I want to hear about it. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, you can feel afraid and not be in danger. Please remember to like and subscribe. It means a lot. Until next time.